Welcome, everybody. If you're just joining with us, we have about 45 participants now, 55 short of 100. We can definitely get up there. So please send your texts us, send your emails out to your teammates to let them know that we have a great speaker this morning. And he is none other than Mr. Christion Sadler. Now, if you haven't heard Christion's introduction before, in his young teens, Christion was quite a troublesome young man. He was kicked out of class a lot. He was very mischievous, and as he got older, he was in quite a bit of financial scarcity. He had a daily wage job in a steel fabrication company, and around this time, he had heard about real estate and the wealth opportunity, the wealth generation that it could create for him. So he started attending different events, but felt like he wasn't going very far. Eventually, he did find Renatus and started getting around people that he wanted to be like. And he was constantly serving, staying late, helping out wherever he could. And because of his determination, Christion has now been in the real estate business for over 13 years. He has done multiple real estate transactions that have netted over 7 figures. He is a PIT team member, one of the founding team members of Team Elevate. He's a marketing leader. And I look up to Christion because he exemplifies servant leadership. And we are just very fortunate this morning to have Christion with us today. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on the line Christion Sadler. Good morning, Christion. How are you today?
Good morning, Abby. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Good, man. Hey, thanks for everything that you do in starting off these calls. And not only on these calls, you do a lot for this community. And I see it every single week. You're showing up and you're serving, and I'm really grateful for it. This thing doesn't run without people like you and people that are willing to step up to the plate and take on responsibility. And you have taken on these calls and made them your own, and just love the way that you kick things off. And I'll tell you, if you guys are getting on these calls late, you're missing out on some really great info, because Abby gets these things started with some the videos that are really pertinent to your business. And quite frankly, if I'm being honest, I'm not usually watching those outside of these calls. And so it's great for me to stay up to date with the generally speaking and with the money mastery, because otherwise I don't find myself going to seek them out. And so these calls are a great way to stay up to date on those. And then, of course, the trainings that we get from Michael and from Bill and from Dane, it's really cool to be a part of this as well. So thank you, Abby, and thank you everybody who is on the line here today. We're going to jump into some info. And if you remember, we started the conversation last week about getting back to the basics. And that's one thing that I find is many times people who feel like they're working themselves to death but are not getting results, oftentimes just aren't doing the basics. When it really comes down to it, all I have to do is say, show me your numbers. And oftentimes they don't have numbers to show. And without doing the basics, without going through the simple activity of find the people, tell the story, build for events, and follow up, well, it's unlikely that you are going to have results. And so you want to focus on the process, not the result. And I actually took that from Noah Aliva when he trained it on the Founders webinar. And I had him kind of dive into it on our PIT team call last week as well, because I think it's such a key principle. It's simple, right? And that's the key, is this simple principle of focusing on the process, not the result, is what can keep your head in the game and keep you moving forward and also keep you productive. So if you get focused too much on the result, well, there's a couple of things that'll happen. If you are focused on the result and you're not getting results, you may find yourself trying to shift and change constantly what you're doing. And every time you shift strategies and you shift the way that you're doing things, it's like you're starting the engines all over again. I mean, if you can imagine, if you were trying to get a jumbo jet off of the ground and you were the pilot, right? And you started things up and you did your system checks and you turned those engines on, you got them revved up and you got them up and going, and then you said, you know what, we're not quite moving yet. Let's reset, let's restart. And so you shut everything down and you started that whole process over again. Well, you know that every time you did that, you would stop. And even if you had a little bit of momentum going down the runway, every time you shifted strategies and decided to turn off those engines, I mean, you're in danger of hitting the end of the runway without taking off. And so we don't want to see you guys do that. We don't want to see you crash and burn. Instead, we want to see you get results. And best way to get results is not to focus on the result, but instead to focus specifically on the process and what you've got going on with the process. So last week we talked a lot about finding the people. What are you going to do? How are you going to find those people? Some of the different ideas and strategies for finding the people. And today I want to talk about telling the story, because the key is every single one of you have a story to tell, and you can point the credibility and the responsibility elsewhere, right? You can borrow other people's credibility. However, what I've found is it really comes down to your mental attitude. If you have a positive mental attitude about what you're doing and what you're learning, it's going to be easier for you to share the story to somebody else. And if you have a negative mental attitude, if you are, frustrated or, not happy with things, well, it's that same thing. If you're focused on the results that you don't have, you're unlikely to share in a way that inspires others to want to join you, right? So you've got to put yourself in a position where you have that positive mental attitude. You've got to use your enthusiasm. There is just about no force more powerful than somebody with enthusiasm. And that's what we want to do for you, is help guide you along the way of sharing your story powerfully. So one of the things that I want to help remind you of first thing is your story. So let me switch over to our whiteboard here. And today we're going to talk about telling the story. Let me just move these controls out of the way. All right. Now, something to think about, guys, when you're thinking about your story is many of you are thinking that you don't have a story until you've done, a real estate deal. And some of you, once you do a real estate deal, if you've used that excuse, you've already trained yourself that it's okay to have excuses. So when you do one real estate deal, you say, oh, well, as soon as I do, real estate deals consistently. And then when you start doing real estate deals consistently, you'll say, yeah, but, as soon as I do, commercial real estate, I've never done commercial. All I've done is flip a few properties. And this list could go on and on and on. I remember actually doing a training call, and we were helping people, kind of come up with their story. And we had somebody on here, and we were going through, and we were having him break down why he didn't think he had a story. And it was this classic example, because he was going through, oh yeah, well, I've done this, but, I haven't done this. I've done this, but I haven't done that. And, the guy already had a ton of success. He'd already done deals. He had already enrolled students. He had already become, a 5-star and made the $10,000 check, but none of it was enough for him to feel like he had a powerful story. And the truth is, many of you, most of you, I would dare say probably all of you, have a story after you've been to your very first 5 pillars presentation, okay? Because when you think about some of the strategies that are focused on within there, it's really simple to just do the math. And if you do the math and you do it with your own income, if you do it with your own cash flow, you'll realize that just with velocity banking alone, you have a story. In fact, some of you have a 6-figure positive story, right? Some of you can look at it. I know that Kip and Laura Brown were some of these people where, you know what? They saw it. They got it. They did the math one time. And they had a, $450,000 home. And when they did the math, they realized they were going to save over $150,000 in interest that they were no longer going to pay. So what's stopping you? What's stopping you from doing the math and looking at it? And when somebody says, so what have you done? You can say, well, let me tell you. My very first experience with this group, I actually learned about this strategy, a banking strategy. And when I did the numbers and I looked at it, if I applied it into my life, I could save $20,000, $40,000, $150,000 in interest, and I could actually pay off my mortgage in half the time or a third of the time, or whatever your number is. Obviously, you have to run it with thinking about your numbers. But I mean, how many people are missing out on that opportunity because they get excited, they enroll, they start seeing all this success, they start seeing what other people are doing, and all of a sudden they start comparing themselves. Guys, that comparison game is not helping you. It is not moving you forward. Because what's going to happen if you compare yourself to somebody else and even to your own results, right? If those results are good, if you're doing better than somebody next to you, what is that going to incentivize you to do? Slow down, right? If you're looking at your results, you get good results, and this is what many people do, then they say, you know what? I've got some things coming in. I can relax a little while. Well, that's not very productive. If you're looking at other people's results and you're saying, oh, well, at least I'm doing better than them, what are you going to do? You're going to slow your progress. So instead, we want you to focus on the process and focus on the fact that you already have a story. You already have success. So again, once you come to your very first presentation, you already have a story. So when you start telling people, which by the way, this is something that's key for you guys. Start telling everybody what you're doing. Talk about the benefits that your business can offer them or somebody that they know. And we'll get to that here in a minute. But first, we want to go into and remind you that you have a story. So do your math with velocity banking. That can be one simple thing that you do is, you know what, you could even pull up the velocity banking calculator. Probably all of you who have been to a presentation have gotten one of those, right? I know that they're working right now on the velocity banking app. And I know that that's going to be powerful because I got to do a little test run with it when I was in the corporate studio last week. And it's really designed in a way, it's much less in depth than what we have now with our calculators, which are essentially fancy spreadsheets, right? And instead, it's an app that just simply allows them to plug in their numbers and get their result. So imagine that for a second. If you could just show somebody, hey, if you apply this strategy using, what you have right now, this could be your result. Well, do that for yourself. Just do the basic math on velocity banking, and now you have a story. And so now, no matter what happens over the next week, over the next month, even over the next year, as you're taking the time to learn your education and study and build your team and get access to the resources, you still have a story to talk about with velocity banking. Now, the next thing is, again, after that very first presentation, right, you can talk about your tax savings. Now, the interesting thing is, just with what you have learned in the 5 pillars, you can do the math on your own taxes. You can look at if you just saved, you know, $12,000 per child, or if you just started writing off all of your expenses that can be business related, and you just simply did the math on that. And then you take your AGI, your adjusted gross income, and do your taxes off of those instead of right now, you're doing your taxes off of your total income, right? You're doing it off of the gross that you bring in with your W-2 job. Well, guess what? Right there alone, you've got a story, because simply doing the math and then, of course, moving forward and taking that action, it doesn't matter what happens over the next week, over the next month, over the next year, as you're learning this information. And it could be longer than a year. Some of you, you know, you hear the words and you allow yourself to still be, you know, out of the scenario. And you hear me say, you know, a year, and you think, well, I've been in longer than a year. Well, I've been in for 2 years. Well, I've been in for 5 years. I don't care how long you guys have been in. What I'm saying is start focusing on the fact that you already have a story, right? And then get to the process of telling that story. And you want to tell that story over and over and over again. Now, the next thing is the people that you've met. Apologize. People and the connections. On your very first exposure to Renatus, you had the opportunity to get to know people and make connections that you didn't otherwise have. That is a story in and of itself. So when, oh, apologize, somebody's off of mute. Okay, you muted yourself, thank you. So when somebody says, hey, how's that real estate thing going? You can say, well, let me tell you. And you can start talking about the people that you've met, the connections that you've made, and the, you know, already what you've added to your team. So you already have a story from that very first presentation. What's the next thing? Well, on top of the people and the connections, what you've learned, right? That looks like 2 R's or 2 N's. I don't know which. So let's just fix that. All right, what you have learned. So every single thing that you learn within your journey with Renatus is a win. And when you celebrate those wins, guess what? People are attracted to that. People are attracted to enthusiasm. So you can share, hey, I just learned how I could pay off a mortgage in 1/3 of the time. Hey, I just learned how I could pay 2/3 less in taxes. Hey, I just learned how I could get access to, you know, literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of other investors that can help me move towards my goals, right? So you can use all of these and you can share, I just learned. So as you're telling the story, don't just do it when people ask you, hey, how are things going, right? You can also proactively call other people. So let me do this. Get rid of some of this, and let's talk about that conversation. All right, just switching colors here. All right, so telling the story. So you get into your, hold on. All right, somebody is on it with mutes. I think that's probably Abby. Thank you, Abby. Makes me feel better that I don't have to check those every time because you're getting people muted. All right, so telling the story. What if you just started calling people? And who are these people? Well, it could be your mom and dad. It could be your uncle and your aunt. It could be your brother and your sister. It could be your cousin. It could be none of those people. It could be your friends. It could be, you know, an ex-colleague. It could be somebody from your club or organization. It could be the person you play volleyball with. It could be, you know, the individual that that you see every time you go into the gas station. There's, you know, on and on and on and on. And when you start off the conversation with, hey, dude, I just learned, fill in the blank, right? Hey man, hey mom, hey brother, I just learned a strategy that is allowing people to pay off a 30-year mortgage in a third of the time without changing their lifestyle or increasing their income. And then you're going to listen, right? So, hey, I just learned, and then you're going to look for signs of intrigue. And so if they look at you funny and they lean in and say, what are you talking about? Well, now you know that you've got them intrigued. Now, if they lean back and say, cool, probably not very intrigued, right? There's ways of saying cool. So if they lean back and say, cool, probably not very intrigued, but if they lean back and say, cool, you guys get the difference, right? You guys can hear it. Even with me on the phone, without even looking at my body language, you can hear whether there's signs of intrigue. So when you get those signs of intrigue, when they start asking you questions, here's the key, right? So 1, I just learned. 2, look and listen for intrigue. Don't correct my grammar, my spelling, or my handwriting. All right, number 3. Then you're going to share, but not too much. Do not fulfill the intrigue. And then you're going to make the invite. Right? So, hey dude, I just learned how to pay off a mortgage in a third of the time without having to change my income or my lifestyle. What do you mean by that? Well, I'll tell you, it's actually a simple strategy. I can't believe they don't teach it in school, and it just has to do with the different banking tools that you use. So it's a lot, but it can be done with something as simple as a credit card. Oh, what do you mean? Tell me more about that. What does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what, I'm just learning, but I'm going to be going to another workshop this Thursday. It's free. Why don't you tag along? Well, I just learned it, but I'm actually going to be going to a house tour with this group that taught me this strategy, and I think they're going to be, sharing a little bit more about it. I'm going already. It's free if I bring you as my guest. Why don't you tag along? Do you want me to pick you up, or should we just meet there? Right. So I just learned, look and listen for intrigue, share, but not too much, and then make the invite. Now, another way that you could very simply call people and share, right, by telling the story is you can talk about the benefits of your business, right? You can share about the ways that your business can benefit them or somebody that they know. And so we're going to talk about that conversation. And one of the ways to do it, one of the very simple ways to do it is actually share with them. I've committed, oops, let me throw this onto drawing. I've committed, now the first thing you got to do is commit, right? To talk to at least, and then you can say what that is. I'm going to say one person a day. You can say 5 people a week. You could say, 2 people a day, 5 people a day. You could say 1 person a week. If you're just starting and you're really freaked out about this and you're just talking to the people, and that alone is scary for you. whatever that is. I've committed to talk to at least one person a day or whatever that is and share with them the ways my business could help them or someone they know. So it might be better to start typing these out when I do these, just simply from the fact that I want to write fast enough that I keep up with my words, and it would be better if it was a little cleaner. I'm going to try that moving forward. All right, so I've committed to talk to at least one person a day and share with them the ways my business could help them or someone that they know. Would you be open to taking a few minutes? Right? Would you be open? Would you be open to just taking a few minutes? Or you can say, do you got a sec that you would be willing to listen? That one might actually get you more results. Do you got a sec that you'd be willing to listen? I'm actually going to erase this, and we're going to do that because, a few minutes, some people have a few minutes, but other people, a few minutes is too much. But everybody's got a sec, right? So let's write that in here. You got a sec? That you'd be willing to listen? Got a sec that you'd be willing to listen? And what are most of those people going to say? I mean, if you're calling people, whether you have talked to them in a year, whether you've talked to them yesterday, there's nothing weird about this conversation, right? You don't have to go into all the niceties and have it be weird. And that's one thing you want to avoid, right? Is you call somebody up and you're nervous. And so you say, hey, how's the kids? Oh my gosh, how's your mom doing? I know that she had the surgery. Hey, how's work and how's this and how's that? Oh, by the way, guys, nobody wants to hear that. Oh, by the way, because all of a sudden, all that time you spent, catching up, they think, oh, there was an agenda behind all of that. Now, one thing you can do is if you haven't talked to somebody in a while, you could actually say something to the effect of, hey, Sally, I'm calling you hey, Sally, it's been a long time, haven't talked to you. I've got two reasons to call. One is personal, I just want to catch up with you. The other is business. Which would you like to talk about first? But what I will say is with this script right here, a lot of times you don't even have to share that. You don't even have to, break that ice, because you can simply say, hey, Sally, I know it's been a long time since we've talked, but I've committed to talk to at least one person a day and share with them the ways my new business could help them or someone that they know. Do you got a sec that you'd be willing to listen? And what is she going to say? Yes, absolutely. And so you're going to go into at that point and you're going to share. Well, the first way that my business might help you or somebody that you know is that I'm working with a group and a community of real estate investors. And we offer solutions to people who need to sell. So if you know anybody in that position, somebody that is, either facing foreclosure, having trouble making their mortgage payments, or just simply needs to get out quickly, we can offer them solutions that they may not be able to find on the traditional marketplace. And with our buying power, we can act very quickly. Let me ask you, Sally, do you know anybody that's in that position that needs to sell their property fast? please remember to shut up. After you've asked the question, please remember, you just got to be quiet. You got to listen. If they're taking a while, right? If they're silent, don't interrupt them with, well, I can share with you the next thing. Or it could be anybody, it could be this, and it could be that, and it could be this. Instead, once you ask the question, you're just going to listen, right? So it's the interesting thing. You're asking them if they'd be willing to listen to you. And then you, key point, have to be willing to listen to them and hear what they mean, not just what they say, right? And so they may say, not off the top of my head. At that point, you can follow up with, well, do me a favor. If you can think of anybody or if any type of a situation like that pops up, would you be willing to just give me a call or maybe even ask them if they'd be willing to let me call them? Sure, absolutely. Okay, great. So the next way, Sally, that my business could benefit you or somebody that you know is that oftentimes through my community real estate investors, I know about properties before they hit the market. And so sometimes, even in the competitive market that we're in today, I can help somebody save cost or at least get access to the property without having to go through a typical bidding war. Do you happen to know anybody right now that's looking to buy a property? And yes, I'm shutting up for a dramatic effect. I'm trying to leave that pause. Now, please remember that pause could be seconds. It could be a full minute. You've got to train your brain to just be patient. If they're taking a long time, it's because they're thinking of an answer. They're thinking of somebody who might be in that situation. So ask the question and shut up. And if they say, no, I mean, yeah, I guess I know a couple people right now. They're really working with agents. I don't know they'd be a good fit for you. Okay, great. Hey, if you know anybody that is looking for that type of situation, do me a favor and send them my way. I'll see what I can do for them. So, Sally, the next way that my business may benefit you or somebody that you know is I actually have been learning this strategy, and we now teach this as a group where people could pay off a mortgage or other large debts in a half to maybe even a third of the time without changing their lifestyle or having to increase their income. Do you happen to know anybody that has mortgage or a large debt that would want to pay that off faster? Now, what are you hoping for with all of these, right? You're hoping they say, well, what about me, right? But you're not going to lead them, because if it's your idea, then there's no commitment. If it's their idea, it's a lot easier to make the invite. Now, here's the key thing that I would tell you is, if she says, well, what about me? Then you're going to say, well, what about you? What debts are you thinking about? What have you got going on right now? How long do you have left on your mortgage? Right? Ask some more questions. My rule for myself is I want to at least have them answer 3 questions before I make the invite, right? So 3 questions about something specific before I make the invite. And the reason is, if you jump straight to the invite, for some reason, the commitment of that person goes down, right? And then you want to double commit as well. So let's do a couple more, and then we can talk about that double commitment. So, she shares, you either make an invite or you don't make an invite. You either, ask for a referral, or whatever, comes about of that next question, and then you share again. Well, Sally, I appreciate that. Here's the next thing. Through this community real estate investors, one of the things that we also focus on with financial literacy is not paying more than your fair share in taxes. And so we've been able to see people end up paying 2/3 less in taxes, and sometimes even when they start earning more income. Do you happen to know anybody that's in a position where they're paying too much in taxes and would like to save some costs there? What about me? Oh, I was just talking with my cousin the other day, and he was talking about how he makes six figures, but he only brings home like 50 grand. He's somebody that would definitely be interested. Well, let me ask you, Sally, would you be willing to make an introduction so that maybe I could share with him where he could learn some strategies to save some of those taxes? Sure, absolutely. Let's get him on the phone, whatever that is. Okay, Sally, so the last thing that I'm going to share with you today. Now, I'm not telling you this is the last one. You guys can have as many as you choose, right? But I would script them out. I would definitely, at least bullet point them. And if you're not comfortable with the conversation, write down what that conversation is. And so last one that I'm going to share on the call here today is, and Sally, the last thing is, through this community real estate investor, I've actually been tasked with the opportunity to help grow our community of real estate investors. And what that looks like is finding other people that want to expand their horizons financially by learning how to invest in real estate and learning, financial literacy strategies. Do you know anybody that would like to earn extra income either through business or real estate and would want to work side by side with local successful entrepreneurs? You know what? My son was just telling me how he does not want to get a job and he's graduating high school and he's looking at how he could get into business for himself. You ought to talk to him about it. Okay, cool. What's the best way of getting a hold of him? You guys get the idea. So, telling the story. Remember, it can be simple. Remember, you already have a story. Remember, not every conversation is going to lead to an invite, but these conversations can lead to future conversations. And the only way those future conversations are going to build intrigue for people to want to show up is if you have a positive mental attitude and you share your enthusiasm. So your story is not just for other people. Your story is for yourself. Remind yourself of the little successes, the small successes along the way, and celebrate them. Celebrate those little successes, share them with other people, and your excitement, your enthusiasm, and your success are going to be infectious to where people feel like they need to know more. We've got a couple of chats in here. There's only your picture on the phone, screen share. Jesse can see the screen. Ronnie, the process method is a winner. Focus on the process to change the thought process, comparing yourself. How key. Perfect. All right, folks, I appreciate you all being on here. Again, I got to jump off and get on to another leadership call. But you guys all rock. Go out and make it a thriving Thursday. And I'll see you all soon. For those of you in Utah, we'll see you tonight over at the Salt Lake Community College campus. Get out there and make it happen. Stick to the basics. Focus on the process.